All right, here we go. Welcome to episode 335 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Catlett.
Good evening, or afternoon, or morning, depending on what you're listening to this as. Mr. Bell, how are you?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm good. In real time, we're recording this in between Christmas and New Year's. So hopefully your Christmas was good and you have epic New Year's plans afoot, is my wish for you.
Absolutely. I just had my last Christmas with kids in the house, with my kids in the house. I'm sure someday I'll have grandkids, but it was
So we're just not going to talk about the ones you kidnap and keep tied up in the basement. We're just not going to include them.
well, they're not mine. I mean, they're not my blood.
That's fair. But sorry, I interrupted a heartfelt comment. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just it's kind of a jarring realization that parenthood is over.
You could adopt me.
I don't think it'd be the same.
Could come and, ask for money and, break things randomly.
Yes. All right.
Bring
anyway,
home spouses you don't approve of. No, none of that. Okay, well, I tried.
No, it's just not the same. Okay,
my Christmas was great. Thanks for asking.
I'm very glad to hear that. It's all right. I was gonna tell everybody what's up and coming on this episode.
Please do.
So we have 4 stories today. It's a little bit shorter than normal. First is we have reports of fake proof of concepts on GitHub that are infested with rats. We have Santa delivering Mongo bleed. We have some zombie FortiGate vulnerabilities and a pretty interesting article on it's a kind of a retrospective on the Oracle eBusiness hacks that I thought were worth talking about.
So nothing but good news from us today.
As always. But before that, I do want to say thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you so much. Definitely appreciate you. And also a quick reminder that the thoughts and opinions we express are ours and not those of our employers. I should actually probably add a slide for that too.
And a link to our legal firm that you can send all complaints to.
That's true. Well, everybody has, most people have the place they can file that report. Just right into the trash.
That's fair.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump in. First story is from Bleeping Computer, and the title here is Web Rat Malware Spread via Fake Vulnerability Exploits on GitHub. Now, this is a little interesting because last week we talked about how AI-generated proof of concepts are starting to gum up the works. We have talked in the past about things similar to this, but I think there's an overall trend of security, especially in the corporate world, security researchers or security staff wanting to assess for themselves whether or not some component in their infrastructure is vulnerable. And so they're, quite often when a new vulnerability is disclosed, there's this mad dash to go try to find proof of concept code to see, what you can learn and again, assess your own vulnerability to the problem, or perhaps look to see if there are adjacent problems, looking for similar issues in other applications. There's lots of reasons why people would want to have proof of concept code. And so this is, a social engineering attack that takes advantage of that. I think it's particularly problematic because it's really targeting security teams, right? And quite often those security teams have, elevated privileges, or, that they have the potential to cause harm that, maybe the average person wouldn't. And so this is a really good call out that, hey, if you're going to do this, you should probably be a little more skeptical about, where you're where and how you're getting your proof of concepts, but also make sure that you're doing it in a way that is a little more, a little more cautious, a little more safe than you may otherwise. So, doing it on sandbox systems, your test systems, that sort of thing, understanding that that there are adversaries out there who are taking advantage of your desire to find and run proof of concept code.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. To the points you raised, you hit a couple that I had on my notes too. One that I was also interesting is this concept of, hey, I want to go find a POC, is usually coming from random researchers on random spots. So the whole idea of, hey, only download things from known, safe, valid vendors goes right out the window, because now I'm intentionally going and looking for things that are hobbyist or researcher level that are coming from GitHub that I'm just ignoring the concept of, is this something that is a known safe download spot? Because I'm intentionally seeking out something that is raw and from GitHub or GitLab or something like that, that ability to vet that is just not part of my criteria. So already I'm setting myself up for much higher likelihood of something malicious coming my way, because I'm not going to some sort of safe download spot. And to your point, yeah, most of these folks running this usually have some sort of elevated privileges. So I think they mentioned in the article things like, run it in the sandbox, be skeptical. But I think this is, again, to the same point we were making last week. Trusting random POCs is going to become a problem. And so then it becomes, who do I trust? And who is a good vetted, reliable producer of POCs or vetter, or there's got to be some sort of web of trust. It doesn't have to be, but I imagine there will be some sort of web of trust that will get built up around this. So which kind of sucks. Like, if you're a new researcher on the scene and you don't have your reputation yet and you're putting out some good research, people might look at it skeptically because it's being abused in this way. And now they're like, I don't know who you are. I don't trust you. I don't want to download your POC. So it just, all around, it's problematic, and bad guys suck. That's my takeaway.
That they do. This particular story is talking about some research that Kaspersky published, and they identified that there were 15 different repositories that were distributing this WebRat malware, and they span a bunch of different recent CVEs, right? And it's everything from a WordPress vulnerability to Windows Remote Access Manager to a Windows MS-HTML vulnerability, and several others as well. Again, when I was running a security shop, that was a very common element of triage, was to try to assess how severe our vulnerability. Like, is this something that we need to panic about? And one of the ways we do that is by testing, and so especially if you have some of the componentry in place that is affected by a vulnerability, you need to make some kind of quick determination, like, should I shut it off? Can I wait until the weekend to apply the patch, or what have you? It's this sort of thing that allows you, or gives you some insight to make a more informed decision. So, there's just a lot of unbridled enthusiasm to run off and download this stuff. And I don't know that we are fully appreciating that this is now being weaponized against us. So this is an important call out. We're, as security people, we are the intended targets of this, right? And I think it's important to recognize that, in the past, we all have made fun of salespeople and HR people and falling for lame fishes. But like, now we're in the target. We're in the crosshairs. We're the targets. And this is something that we now have to deal with and be aware of.
Indeed. And the web rat itself and the malware is not that novel or interesting, but the way that it's spreading, I think, is the key point here.
Absolutely.
And once
All
again,
right.
by the way, GitHub and other code repositories being used as a malware distribution method, which again continues to be a problem. And I have said this many, many times. At some point, I wonder when this is going to hurt, the Git repositories of the world, and they need to start taking steps. But there's no good answer for them either, because what are they going to do? Like vet every single bit of code that comes in and slow all that down? That's not going to work. So, but their reputation gets hit every time this happens.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Our next story is about MongoBleed. So just to tee this up, on Christmas Eve, there was a critical vulnerability disclosed by the MongoDB team, and some early reporting called it a remote code execution vulnerability, but in fact, it actually wasn't. But that said, it is still pretty significant. So, it was urgent for people to patch, with expediency, but not necessarily because it was, some kind of unauthenticated remote code execution vulnerability, but because it was similar to things we've seen in the past where, you could induce, an attacker could induce the database server to leak sensitive information, including perhaps credentials, which could then in turn allow remote code execution. So I think that was how it kind of got turned around a bit. There was some discussions with reporters, in the MongoDB team trying to clarify that I saw. So interesting, but the reality is it was still a very serious vulnerability. The new news, which was quite unfortunate, I think, for a lot of people who were hoping to have a quiet Christmas, was that on the day after Christmas, actually, I think it was, depending on time zones, either late in the day on Christmas Day or the day after Christmas, a security researcher released proof of concept code that actually exploits this vulnerability and does a pretty methodical scan, allows you to do a pretty methodical scan of the memory space used by the MongoDB server. So, you could conceivably get just about every, bit of memory out of the server. And, it's a little unclear at this point, but there have been some discussions. There's, kind of separate and apart from what's reported in this story. There's an online game called Rainbow Six Siege, or Rainbow Siege 6, that has been hacked. And
Rainbow Six Siege, Rainbow Six was a Tom Clancy book that they made a first-person shooter out of, and they're an elite counter-terrorist organization. How could you?
Whatever. I'm old. Anyway, it is a very popular online game and has, I guess, a lot of very diehard followers who spend quite a bit of money on it. And allegedly, this vulnerability was used to hack that game. And I think the game may still actually, the online game may still be offline today, which is a couple days after, because of that. And allegedly it was, this vulnerability that allowed the attackers to apparently grant billions of dollars of, in-game money to every player. So it's caused a lot of consternation, and people are not wanting to play because they even before it was taken down, because they didn't want to have their account suspended and so on. So a bit of chaos. I don't know why this keeps happening. This sort of thing keeps happening over Christmas. It's so incredibly frustrating. Now, as I sit here today, it was. I was watching it as a spectator sport. In the past, it would have been a lot, been a kind of a holiday ruining experience for me, and I'm sure it was for a lot of people. But this is one of those, really, really bad vulnerabilities, and it's perhaps unlike the React for shell that we talked about recently, like there's no good reason that this one should be exploitable by by most people. Like there's no good reason, and I say this understanding that somebody will come forward and say, oh, I have a good reason, but there's no good reason in general that your MongoDB should be accessible from the internet. Like it just shouldn't. And this is yet another one of those, like, why have we bought so hard this concept of zero trust when we understand that there are vulnerabilities like this which exist, and they're orthogonal to all of the authentication layers that exist. Like in the perfect world, this kind of vulnerability wouldn't exist, and you could rely on on that design model, but you can't. And so stop freaking exposing this stuff, please.
First of all, good word there, orthogonal. It's a $3 word right there. That's good. I think, honestly, we just have taught the current generation of infrastructure, technical operations, not security operations, but cloud operations folks, whatever it is, that this is normal. The concept of everything just wants to be open to the internet makes it easy. Just assume that's your plumbing. I think a lot of the current generation did never deal with a true data center behind a firewall, with the internet being a new thing that was getting piped in from one spot. Now the internet is just ubiquitous. It really is. I hate to say it, but the perimeter has dissolved, which we've seen thought leaders say 1,000 times over the years. But we've got to relearn this lesson to reduce our attack surface. And now that doesn't make it, by the way, this no longer a problem at all, because the next stage is, hey, I may be reducing my attack surface to the internet, but I still care about this if it's not exposed to the internet as a lateral movement, as an escalation, once somebody gets a foothold, or social engineers an endpoint, whatever it is. I still need to care about this, but just having it open to the internet for anonymous traffic to hit just dramatically raises the likelihood, in my mind, of this sort of thing happening when some sort of vulnerability comes out. We have a story to talk about later that you've already mentioned about Oracle. Similar situation in that case, where if you've got a 0 day you don't know about and there's no patch available, at least not having exposed the internet makes it slightly harder for the bad guy to hit, maybe a lot harder. I just think today's engineering practices have forgotten this key lesson. And it's just easier and more efficient and quote unquote worth the risk to leave it exposed. And we're just going to keep seeing this kind of thing happen, I think, until we either learn this lesson again or it'll just keep happening, I guess. I don't know what the or would be in that situation.
I don't think there's another side to that or. I think it's just going to likely just keep happening. Now, I believe some reporting I saw, and it's not discussed in this, but I saw some researchers using Census and Shodan and identified somewhere between 200 and 250,000 exposed MongoDB instances on Christmas Day. Quite unlikely that those had been patched, in the 18 hours at the time since that vulnerability had been fixed. So
yeah, especially around Christmas.
That's a lot of systems. Now it's not necessarily wormable in ways that some other vulnerabilities have been. It does require a little more work to leverage, but I think as we go on, we're going to see a lot more of these attacks being automated. And I don't mean like in the AI way. I mean, like you can use those services to identify your targets and you can script the exploitation of it. Like it doesn't require hands-on keyboard. You can kind of set up the plumbing and just let your attack script go. And in that way, if you have something like this exposed to the internet, there's really nothing saving you. It's just, you're not blending into the background. You're not able to hide through obscurity because, you're just, you're just whatever company, you're not an important target, it doesn't really matter. So
Yeah.
anyway, I sincerely hope that one of the things we can change is bringing back this notion that not everything needs to be exposed to everyone.
You should really tell your mom that.
Thank you. Oh, gosh.
In terms of why this always happens at Christmas, I actually think there is a intentional aspect of that. If you're a bad actor, at least in most of Western culture, that around Christmas and New Year's, a lot of people are off work, and they also might have change freezes. They might also have all sorts of friction to making changes to production, especially if they're in some sort of retail environment or some sort of, they don't want to jeopardize any Christmas sales, that sort of thing. So I think if you know that and you're sitting on something like this, it's not a bad time to deploy it around Christmas. That's, you probably have a much larger window of exploit opportunity before it gets found, fixed, patches applied, all that kind of jazz.
Yeah, it's a little interesting. One of the challenges, and I've told this story before. One of the challenges I always had was when I worked leading a security team was the incidents dropping right before a holiday or a long weekend or even just a regular weekend. And one of the things I learned about when I started asking questions is that it's not that people didn't know that the thing existed. It's that they didn't want to sit on it. They didn't want to let it go for that weekend or for the long weekend or through the holiday. They didn't want to take the chance. They wanted someone else to know about it. They wanted to allow the system to start working because they would, I guess, feel bad about not having taken action, and it allows them to to enjoy their time off. Maybe I don't know. Now in this instance, like I don't know what I don't know if there was some kind of urgency that drove the MongoDB team to patch it on the 24th versus the 26th. Like I don't know if they were aware that it was and I'm not even necessarily criticizing. Like if you got a patch and it's out there, you should you shouldn't sit on it. There's not a lot of benefit, but it's just interesting that it always seems to happen. I'm sure it's some kind of psychological thing that's going on here.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if somebody did some statistical analysis to see if it really is a perception issue or a reality.
Yeah, for sure.
You're unemployed. You get on that.
I'll get right on it. All right. So next up is a what I call a zombie vulnerability for FortiGate, and this is also from Cybersecurity News. The title here is "Hackers Exploiting 3-Year-Old FortiGate Vulnerability That Bypass 2FA on Firewalls." This thing it's actually older than 3 years old. By the way, this was patched
2020.
This is patched in 2020. This is like almost 6 years old. And it's such a dumb exploit. It basically relies on case insensitivity, right? Or case sensitivity. So if you have your FortiGate set up to authenticate against LDAP, it allows an attacker to change the case of one or more letters such that it bypasses the LDAP group that is set up with multi-factor authentication and then authenticates against the group that doesn't have multi-factor authentication. Now, it still does require the attacker to actually guess your password, right? But it does allow them to bypass multi-factor. Now, this has long been fixed, and they've actually had recommendations on how to mitigate this for quite some time. What is a little unclear to me is what's going on here, because there have been so many FortiGate vulnerabilities over the past 6 years, like a lot of FortiGate vulnerabilities over the past 6 years. And a lot of them have been very critical. This particular one, I think FortiGate rated as like a medium. It's certainly not a high, in their view, it's not a high severity vulnerability. And the wording that they use is very interesting, because they talk about how it's either vulnerable or misconfigured. And so in the mitigation, they talk about how you need to apply the patch, but then you also need to disable case sensitivity, and you should make sure that you're not having backup LDAP groups that would allow this to happen. And so part of me is wondering, is this a little bit of a game, in that it's, the vulnerability, there was a vulnerability in the past that was fixed, but then it also still exists today in a current supported version if you have the configuration set wrong.
I
can't find any information about that.
It's fun. It's so weird to me too. So I kind of, it's mind-boggling to me that LDAP to AD is case insensitive. That's weird to me.
Yes.
And that if you know that and you're integrating with it, that you don't accommodate for that. Like if I knew I was integrating with an authentication system that was case insensitive, I would probably try to ignore case before I sent any data to it and normalize it that way. But it's such a weird, silly little vulnerability based on just, and then the failure condition to me is interesting. Like it falls back to not matching, and therefore like, but to your point, why are people not patching their FortiGates? What the hell?
Yeah. So
I mean, come on.
Part of me thinks that what they're trying to say here is that there's some number of victims who have been compromised recently as a result of not having patched, but then there may also be a population of people who have been compromised where they have patched, but they still have it set, they have it configured incorrectly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also just wonder, I somewhat understand why Fortinet would say, hey, this is a medium, because it's not a remote code exploit. It's not completely disabling login. You still need a valid password. It's just disabling 2FA in certain circumstances that are, somewhat obscure. But I think static passwords are, especially if you've got 2FA, you probably have this false sense of security, so you're more likely to reuse a password.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Once again,
bad news.
Always.
I think it's definitely something to look for if you're a FortiGate customer, but also I think the general case is, where else can this sort of bug appear unintentionally? So
yeah,
LDAP is really pervasive, and so I just have a hard time thinking that this is the only instantiation of this particular problem that you're likely to see.
And you kind of think, hey, this would be a great test case for QA folks. Like, screw with the case of the username and see what happens.
Yes, absolutely.
So that makes me wonder, is the password also treated as case insensitive? I don't think so. I'd have to look that up. I don't know.
I don't think so. I very much doubt that it is. I think this is just the way that it's mapping what group it's attempting to authenticate to.
Right. Because it figures out the group first, then tries to figure out what authentication method, and then call that code, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Just silly.
All right. It is.
Anyway.
Quite silly. And then the last story is, as we talked about, this Oracle eBusiness retrospective. And this one is also from Cybersecurity News. And the title is Lessons from Oracle eBusiness Suite Hack that allegedly compromised nearly 30 organizations worldwide. This is this is an interesting one because we're still to this day learning about net new victims. Like there's very recently been some very recently disclosed data breaches associated with this. And the article itself, by the way, kind of contradicts itself because they say that there was an estimated 100 organizations that were compromised between July and October, but then there's only 30 that have been named publicly. So it's unclear how you bridge that. Now, is that because there wasn't any data stolen? Was it because they, the other 70 paid the ransom and therefore they didn't show up on the breach site? Like there's a lot of questions on how you close that. But regardless, this is a fairly complicated, it's deceptively complicated situation. There was a series of 5 different vulnerabilities that were chained together that allowed this remote code execution vulnerability to occur, which to me, I don't think somebody just stumbled over this. And by the way, the eBusiness Suite isn't just something that you download to your laptop and start hacking away at. Like this exploit chain was the product of some significant work. And, I don't know how that came to be, but the attack itself has been associated with the Clop ransomware gang. Now, unlike a lot of ransomware attacks, there wasn't any data destruction. It was all data theft. But, that's, I guess, neither here nor there. One of the complications for the customers of this, this Oracle suite was the confusion, right around when it was, when the victims were contacted by the threat actor. The threat actor, I guess, was concerned that they wouldn't be taken seriously. So they used a bunch of compromised email accounts to simultaneously flood reports to the victims that, hey, we've stolen your data. And they provided some like directory listings that existed inside the environment that would prove that they had a presence there. After that, obviously Oracle became aware, but Oracle at the time attributed it to some recently patched vulnerabilities. So timing wise, this is a quote, on October 2nd, 2025, Oracle reported that threat actors may have exploited vulnerabilities patched in the July 2025 update and recommended that customers apply the latest critical patch updates. 2 days later, on October 4th, 2025, Oracle released an emergency security alert specifically addressing this new CVE. That advisory confirmed that the vulnerability is remotely exploitable without authentication, and if successfully exploited may result in remote code execution. And this was a net new vulnerability that was not patched in that July update and had been apparently exploited, without any sort of update for, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks. So quite a long time where the victims of this just, they didn't even know that there was a problem, let alone that they were actually being actively exploited. And I can tell you, by the way, from experience, that this is such a complex application. Thinking that you're going to have it instrumented well enough to be able to see that kind of exploitation is going to be really difficult. It's one of those things. Yeah. It's obvious in retrospect, but not while it's happening.
Right. And there's some feel-good platitudes in this article that I just was shaking my head at, like this quote, "This incident underscores the necessity of collective security responsibility amongst vendors, customers, and researchers. Organizations must evolve their defense strategies from reactive to proactive, treating this event as an opportunity for significant security transformation. What does that mean? That sounds great. How do I take that and put that anywhere close to an action plan? Like, to your point, because I was thinking about this too, cool. 0 days are tough. And when I've got a 2-month window here where I can keep getting my butt kicked by a RCE 0 day with no patch and no mitigation, wow, that's kind of close to a worst case scenario for some of these things. So, maybe you could monitor for abnormal exfiltration rates. But again, if I'm a smart attacker, I just slow down my exfiltration. Um, you know, you can say, hey, look for exploit activity, but every single application without an IOC is going to have its own examples of that. Maybe this is where some Blinky Box IOC automated AI tool could, get pitched of like, yeah, we automatically baseline your behavior of the application, and then we spot things that are weird or different. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of voodoo there, but it's a tough one. At this point, I would have to think long and hard about how would I defend or detect this without, retrospect always makes it easy when you've got the IOCs in front of you, but some net new unknown 0 day, boy, and I hate to be defeatist about it.
The only thing that leaves me concerned is that you have this ungodly complex application and you have it exposed to the internet. Now,
I feel like there's a theme.
What I don't understand, and I will just, I'll be very transparent. I don't understand if there is a legitimate reason why you would want to have some component of this application exposed to the internet. Like perhaps there is a legitimate reason, like, for ordering, or like, you don't know who your customers are, and therefore, it's just it's a publicly accessible service. I don't know, but there's got to be, to me, it feels like there's got to be some kind of an inverse relationship between how exposed you allow something to the internet and the level of complexity of that system. And this is super complex.
Yeah. And, that gets me thinking, would a WAF pick up anything? Would, like, I wonder what you could do, but again, this is one set of.
There were a lot of, if you look at the details of the vulnerabilities, there probably were some things like, it was doing header, it was injecting headers, right? So conceivably, if you had a smart enough WAF, again, everything is trivial to see in hindsight, but it's conceivable that if you had an intelligent enough WAF, it could detect that, they were trying to smuggle headers in, or abuse, keep alive connections and things like that, and to pivot around in some pat directory traversal attacks. Like the components were there, but what I don't know, and this is where I kind of come back to, like, a lot of the normal operation of an application like this will probably look somewhat malicious to a lot of those tools.
And then you're tuning. Yeah. So you're tuning against that. You've tuned it so you're not getting false positives, and that may make you miss your real attack traffic because it looks potentially fairly benign. I'd have to test this and see. And even then, let's say you get a hit and you don't know this vulnerability exists. Let's say your WAF goes, this is weird.
Yeah, you call up, in this case, you call up Oracle and say, hey, I saw this. And Oracle's what they're going to turn around and say, hey, did you apply that patch in July?
Right.
And you're going to say, yes, of course I applied the patch in July. And they're going to say, well, then you don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah. Because your WAF can pick up attempts all day long that don't land against exposed web infrastructure. So, man, that's a tough one. There's another paragraph in here that just frustrated me. Well, there's two things. One, Several security experts recommended migrating from on-premise Oracle EBS to cloud-based Oracle Fusion Cloud to enhance security. SaaS models like Oracle Fusion Cloud shift some security responsibilities to the vendor, who continually updates security controls. The Oracle Fusion Cloud supply chain management platform integrates security measures and supports decision making during disruptions. Okay, maybe. That comes with its own interesting problems. Uh, and then next paragraph. Organizations on EBS should adopt a, quote, security first mindset, end quote, from the design phase, embedding security into architecture, access controls, and patch management. Regular security assessments, including vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, help identify weaknesses before they can be exploited. Okay. Don't disagree with the advice. Completely irrelevant in this case.
That's the challenge with this one.
Right.
You're just pointing back to best practices, but it's actually not going to have solved the problem. Like it wouldn't have helped you, no matter how fast you patched. Like that, by the time the patch was out, the damage was done. Like they had already stolen the data.
Been compromised.
Right.
You might have already been compromised, and the patch isn't going to evict the threat actor. So then you've got to go hunt with the new IOCs. Have they been in my environment for the past 2 months? That's
exactly.
There's a side story on this, which is there's actually some drama between Shiny Hunters or Shiny Lapsus Hunters and Clop. Yes. And take this with a grain of salt, right? Because who knows how much of this is accurate, but this is what's been reported. Apparently, this original exploit was written by Scattered Lapsus Hunters, and Clop apparently stole it and started using it. And Shiny Hunters or Scattered Lapsus Hunters, whatever you want to call them, got annoyed, and they leaked it to burn it on October 3rd, 2025. So if you look at the timeline, the patch came out on October 4th. So apparently there was some threat actor on threat actor violence here, which is always fun to see. Clop stole it and was using it, and didn't apparently give proper accreditation or whatever you want to call it to Scattered Lapsus Hunters. And so they burned the exploit as a 0-day to get back at the Clop ransomware group.
And as I mentioned, based on the complexity of this, whoever came up with it spent some serious brain power developing that exploit. This was not something that just tripped over.
So to burn it, Scattered Lapsus Hunters leaked the full exploit code publicly, and this forced Oracle to issue an emergency patch the following day. So Scattered Lapsus Hunters categorized this move as revenge, aiming to disrupt Clop's extortion efforts against major organizations like American Airlines, Washington Post, Emerson. So if Scattered Lapsus Hunters hadn't leaked this code and burned it, who knows how much longer this would have gone on?
Yeah, it's unclear, because the day before, October 2nd, was when Oracle said, "Oh no, nothing to see here. We already fixed this back in July," and then the 3rd, Scattered Lapsus Hunters released the exploit code, and then the next day, Oracle released a patch for. Oh man, that is kind of a wild timeline.
So it's interesting. I don't know. It's a tough one, man. Normally we try to give good advice on the show. If I were faced with this one, I think I don't know. I don't know enough about the eBusiness Suite and indicators that I could have detected against this. Like you said, it's a super complex environment. Ideally, just get it off the internet. But
yeah, I mean, there very well may be legitimate purposes. Unlike MongoDB, like there's no good reason MongoDB should be listening to the internet for anybody to connect to it. There may very well be a reason for you to have some window into Oracle eBusiness. I don't know what it is. I'm sure different use cases will have different different needs, but I I would feel very uncomfortable exposing an application of this level of complexity to the internet for this very reason. That said, like we see, simple applications designed to be an internet hacked all day long. So it's not like, it's anyway, it's all a dumpster fire.
Yay, happy 2020.
Yay. Well, that's why we all have jobs, right? Or some of us have jobs. Anyhow, that is the show for this week. I have on the screen our links. For those of you who are listening, you can find links to the stories we talked about on our website. Just look for episode 335. We do have a burgeoning presence on YouTube, which is just awesome. Thank you, everybody, for following us there. Just look for at Defensive Podcasts, and we have a host of very generous sponsors on our Patreon site. It's patreon.com/defensivesec. And then I think y'all hopefully by now know where to find us on X and on infosec.exchange. So happy New Year. It's been great. Next year is our 15th year, so we look forward to that.
We got old.
Yeah, I was just thinking about. I was in my 30s when this started.
Young, naive, innocent
not
us.
Anymore.
It's not the years; it's the mileage.
And with that, the end. Have a great week. Be safe and enjoy the New Year's festivities responsibly. And we'll talk again soon.
Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.